Hello and welcome back to the Movie Thoughts Podcast. I am your host, Dominic Tartamella. This is episode 156. We're climbing. We're getting there. We're almost at 160. Pretty soon I'll be at 200. Took a little break about for like a month, but I'm back again. Steady stream of episodes coming out back in the movies. This is a funny time. This is winter, depressing, cold. Didn't really want to leave the house too much. And obviously, like, sometimes January doesn't have the best movies either. It doesn't have movies that you really want to run out and go see. But now it's starting to pick up again. Obviously, the bigger movies are coming out. More enticing titles. Last episode, talked about Captain America: Brave New World. Liked it. Didn't love it. As it's sitting with me, I definitely want to watch it again. I think I might like it more upon a second watch, but I didn't hate it. It's enjoyable. It's definitely not a perfect movie. I think it's got a lot of flaws. It's also got a lot riding on it, but it was enjoyable. Harrison Ford turning into the Red Hulk. But if you want to go listen to my full thoughts on that, go ahead and listen to the previous episode. Didn't really get into spoilers too much. Don't think I'm going to do a spoiler episode. Maybe. I don't know. I did get in the mood to watch some of the older Marvel stuff, so I may be doing a rewatch on some of the older Captain Americas and whatnot. But yeah, today's episode is going to be a pretty jam-packed one because we're going to talk about Paddington in Peru, Paddington Bear, which those movies are good movies. The other two are good movies. This one, spoiler, is a good movie. We'll talk about it in a minute. My wife's a big fan of Paddington. We're also going to be talking about Cobra Kai, which just ended. They released their last 5 episodes, and we'll talk about that a little bit. With Cobra Kai, I may get into spoilers, so I will forewarn you that I may get into spoilers. If I'm gonna get into spoilers, I'll give a warning as I talk about them. So have no fear. I'll give you sufficient time to shut the podcast off and mute my stupid ass. But yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about a little bit about the Dexter, because I caught up on shows, man. I caught up on so Cobra Kai ended. I was able to watch all that. Dexter ended, which I was keeping up with that week to week. 10 episodes, Dexter Original Sin. I caught up with that. I'll talk about that a little bit. I won't be spoilery. I went back and finished Tulsa King as well, which is Tulsa King. I'm in Tulsa. I'm a mob boss and doing the things. I liked it. Season 2 was very good. We'll maybe talk about that a little bit more. Yeah. Let's get into some other stuff. I guess. Yeah. Let's do it. Let's do it. First of all, we got another letter. From my dude Brian in Weirton, West Virginia. A text message, a fan mail, whatever you want to call it. If you go on Spotify, there is an option to send a text. I did notice on Apple Podcasts as well, there is an option to send a text, and there's probably on other apps too. You could also message me on Twitter, Dom Solo Reels, Instagram, TikTok, wherever's easier for you. And he brought up last time Letterboxd. I haven't made the Letterboxd yet, but it's coming. It's coming, Brian. I will let you know when I do make it. But he had another question. He said, "Hey, Dom, what were some of your most memorable theater experiences?" I would have to say mine was the first time I saw the Blair Witch Project at a run-down old drive-in theater. I love that, Brian. I love that you got to see that, especially a movie like Blair Witch Project at an old run-down drive-in theater. I've only been to a couple drive-in theaters because there's not really too many around me. I have to travel when I go more, because I'm in New York. When I go to the more upstate New York areas, there are drive-ins, and I did see a double feature of a horror movie once, and I went another time, and I actually saw like Karate Kid there, which was cool, and another older movie that I'm forgetting. I got to ask my wife, but yeah, drive-in is a cool experience right from just being there, especially with a movie like Blair Witch Project. Brian continues, "I was completely under the spell of their marketing campaign and thought this movie was real, which made it way more intense. Also, the time I saw the first Jackass movie was insane." We'll talk about that, my experience in a sec. Packed theater, tons of laughter, beach balls bouncing everywhere. Hopefully those are the only balls bouncing everywhere in a Jackass screening, right? Because you never know. A massive popcorn and nacho fight broke out in the middle of the show. What a crazy, amazing night it was. That was. Thanks, Brian. Those are some fun memories. Those sound like some fun memories, Brian. You were in like fucking National Lampoon's Animal House. A fucking food fight broke out and shit. I would have been pissed, honestly. Me personally, I would have been pissed. But that sounds like a good time. That's the thing people don't realize. If you weren't around when the first Blair Witch Project came out, I mean, how fucking old was I? Let's do some math here because I got to go back. I didn't see it in theaters. It came out in 99, so I was like 9 or 10. Yeah, I was 10. Yeah, I was like 10, going on 11 or whatever. But like, that's the thing. When that movie came out, that people thought that shit was real. I didn't see it in the theater, but like, I remember seeing it on videotape for the first time and renting it. And it was like, I think I was with my cousin, and it was, you're scared. You were like, oh, is this fucking real? Because that marketing, especially when you were younger, you believed it was real. I maybe if I was like an adult man, I wouldn't have thought it was real, but you thought these people really died and shit like that. That was a time too before the internet was so, prominent that like you weren't getting all the details on the internet, right? Like nowadays you just be like, oh, is it fake? Is it real? Oh yeah, you find out it's fake, like a paranormal activity kind of situation. But yeah, those theater experiences, man, that's great. I'm envious of you seeing that at a drive-in theater. Jackass is such a fun time. I definitely have good memories of seeing Jackass, all of them. I remember because it was like, at one point it was an experience to go to the theater with your friends and go see the Jackass movies. I can't remember exactly seeing the first one, but I remember laughing. The second one is the one I feel like where I was like, we were dying, choking. And the cool thing was, honestly, just on like a legacy, getting older kind of thing, when the newer one came out, Jackass Forever, I went with, I think it was my brother-in-law, and my nephew, and I don't know if my cousins were there too. I think my cousins were there too, who I had seen the other ones with. And we were all older and stuff, and it was cool like being with my younger nephew because it was like passing on the torch. As something as ridiculous as Jackass is, it was like, oh, this is nice. Like, we're all laughing together, and we're laughing at seeing people's ball sacks and stuff, and bottle rockets being shot at people's asses. But that's definitely a memorable experience for me as far as my own personal experiences. I mean, off the top of my head, I tried to think about this. I didn't, go super deep, and, because then it's like so many theaters I've been in. But the ones that stuck out as far as movie experiences, I remember, like, obviously more recent movies. Force Awakens was a huge one for me because that build up, being a big Star Wars fan, and however you felt or anybody felt about how those movies ended up, whether you liked them and you hated them, Disney this, Disney that, like the hype for Force Awakens was crazy. That was a crazy, like, nothing will ever compare to that for me, because just being a Star Wars fan and being like somebody who was on the side of, oh, there's never going to be Star Wars movies again, when they were just the originals and the prequels, and then all of a sudden they made this deal, and the trailers were very mysterious, right? You weren't seeing a lot. You weren't seeing Han Solo that much. You weren't seeing Luke. They were giving you glimpses of stuff, so it was kind of like going in. I went in completely blind, right? Which is I feel like that's the best, when you go into a movie that you're super hyped for and you don't know anything about it. And I remember sitting there in that theater while the opening came and the crawl came down, the scroll, whatever the hell you want to call it. And I just had a smile on my face, like, especially after that when they were showing the opening with Kylo Ren and stuff. Like, I felt like a kid, right? There's a couple times when you're an adult, when you're a geek like myself, and you're probably a geek if you're listening to this podcast, that you see a movie that takes you back to your childhood and takes you back to that. The closest thing I had to that recently, and of course I talked about it on the podcast if you've been listening, was Beetlejuice, because that was a big build-up for me. That was a movie I never actually thought would happen. So like sitting in a theater and seeing, oh my God, Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice again, that was a good feeling. Obviously, being a Marvel fan, Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, very good experiences. I saw Endgame so many times. I think I just started dating my wife at that point, and I think there was one time because I didn't want to tell her. She didn't know how much of a maniac I was with going to the movies and going to the movies alone. So like, I seen that movie like God knows. It was at least 5 times in theaters. I kept going. And there was one time that I actually lied to her and was like, oh, I'm going to do something with my nephew, but I was actually going to the movies. And then I told her afterwards. It was like, I went to see Avengers again. But those are good experiences. As far as past experiences that come to mind, Grindhouse by Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez. If you've never seen Grindhouse, it's a double feature, and it's got fake trailers in the middle. That was such a good theater experience. I mean, I was with my friends. I remember I was hyped for it being a Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino fan, and the cast was just packed. And being a horror fan as well, seeing these two guys do, throwback horror Grindhouse movies. It didn't make a lot of money in theaters. It didn't make a lot of money in theaters, but if you saw it in theaters, it was the best experience. If you were with the right audience, I think I went on opening night, and those fake trailers. I could do a whole episode about the Grindhouse movie, but those fake trailers, they all hit. And it's funny enough, I think my friends and I think earlier in the day, we saw the TMNT animated movie. Whatever year that came out was the same year Grindhouse came out. And we saw that movie, and that was pretty good. So, like, we saw that, and then we got out, and we were like, oh, we should go see Grindhouse, too. Or we already had plans, so it was actually a triple feature. And it was a weird triple feature, right? Because it was a fucking kids Ninja Turtle movie. And then Grindhouse. But Grindhouse was such a good time. I love that movie. It took them a little while to release it in that format on Blu-ray and stuff. Originally, they just came out single. Because they didn't make a lot of money, so they were trying to get the most bang for their buck. It was also the fucking Weinstein Company was leading that. So, those shitbags. But they finally did release that, so you could watch it in that form and it's just, it takes me back. That was such a good experience. Just the laughing, and I think I was with the right audience as well. As far as others, Tarantino-related, Kill Bill Volume 1. I remember seeing that in theaters. That was like the return of Tarantino too, because at that point, not so much the return, but he had done Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, right, and Jackie Brown. And I was a little bit too young where I didn't see any of those in theaters. So like Kill Bill was the first Tarantino movie I saw in theaters, Volume 1, and like at that point I was already such a Tarantino fan, so seeing that in theaters, and then that cliffhanger ending, as you know, if you've seen the movie, I'm not going to spoil it for you, and I was like, oh my God. And then I think the other one came out maybe 6 months, 8 months later, whatever it was. That was one of those experiences. As far as quality of the movie, I got to rewatch it, but The Matrix Reloaded, I remember that was a good experience too, just going there, because that was a hyped movie. At that time, the age I was, and the visual effects, they're a little wonky now. Like I said, I have the Matrix movies on Blu-ray, and I have to rewatch them all because it's been such a while. The first one is obviously the best one. But seeing all that, we fighting all the Agent Smiths, that was so cool to see. That was also that time where, like, there was the Matrix video game out. Then that was another one that ended with a cliffhanger that led into Revolutions, which I honestly didn't like Revolutions, but it was just the excitement of that, right? That time of like, oh man, and those were such cool movies when you were like a preteen, teen. What else? Like I said, if I go deep dive, I could talk about this. Could be a whole episode, honestly, Brian. I could talk about this for so long, but other ones that come to mind it's got to be like Dark Knight Rises. I remember seeing Dark Knight. This was before assigned seating, so like I got the tickets opening night, but I got them kind of last minute, and I sat very close to the screen, so it was a little uncomfortable. But still, even sitting that close, you knew you were seeing something special. you knew you were seeing, Heath Ledger as the Joker. That obviously, like, not maybe 5 months later, I got a fucking Heath Ledger Joker tattoo on my arm because I was like, shit, this guy's a dude right here. Because I was somebody who doubted Heath Ledger's ability too. I'm not afraid to admit it. I've said it before on the podcast. I think, like, when I first heard that was announced, I was kind of like, Heath Ledger, 10 Things I Hate About You, A Knight's Tale as the Joker. Meanwhile, the last time you had Jack Nicholson, how little did I know, that he would perform such an iconic role, even in the little time he's in that movie. But as far as that, Interstellar, if you go Christopher Nolan movies, Interstellar, another one that was a great experience. Dark Knight Rises, I actually saw a marathon that started at like 5 p.m. And it was, this was before, obviously, ironically enough, but like, the Dark Knight Rises had that shooting that happened, a terrible incident. And they used to do before then, they used to do more midnight screenings. Now, if you keep up with going to the movies and you see, they do a lot of early screenings. That didn't really start until after that. They do a lot of 7 p.m. screenings. I think they just figured, like, not that, listen, a horrible thing could happen anytime, but what are you doing midnight screen? Like, things could go earlier. It's a shame that we live in this world. I personally appreciate the fact that they moved the times up because, like, you just want to see the movie. What difference does it make? So now they do those early Thursday screenings, sometimes as early as, like, afternoon. But I remember when I saw Dark Knight Rises, that was in IMAX. I went to somewhere in Jersey, and an AMC, and they did the 3 movies, Batman Begins, Dark Knight, and then it led into midnight, Dark Knight Rises. That's like the one and only time I've done one of those marathon kind of things, other than like a Grindhouse double feature. I know nowadays they do the crazy ones, do the Marvel ones. Like, I know somebody who did that once, and they were posting about it, and it looked like a fucking absolute nightmare. But like the Dark Knight movies, the trilogy, I think a trilogy you could do. I think, like, I could do a trilogy. I don't know about, like, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but I could definitely sit and watch the original Star Wars movies in a theater. I did this, like, that's about the same length as, like, the Batman Begins, Dark Knight Rises. The only thing that, like, with those Marvel ones is, like, by the time you get to the actual movie, the new movie, you gotta feel like a fucking zombie. You gotta feel like you just went through, like, prison torture where they're keeping you up with the lights on and shit and falling asleep in a movie chair. They do breaks, and I remember, like, there was little intermissions in between the movies. So if it started at 5, Batman Begins, then there was, like, a 20-minute intermission, then it was Dark Knight, there was, like, a 20-minute intermission, and then it led into Dark Knight Rises. But that was, oh, man, I was so hyped for that movie. And a lot of those experiences that I'm talking about, they got, intensified, and they got a greater meaning to me because of how hyped I was for those movies, right? So I was sitting in there, like, ready to see Bane. I was obsessed with that movie. And that's what made that experience so fun. I was satisfied. I like Dark Knight Rises a lot. It brings me back. I think people appreciate it more. I think a lot of people bashed it when it came out. It's definitely got inconsistencies and stuff, but that was a great theater experience. As far as, like, other ones, I'm trying to think back. I know I had a similar experience with Spider-Man 3 back in the day, but I remember being disappointed. I remember being like, oh, this wasn't as good. But yeah, as I said, I could probably sit there. If I sit here and I with a piece of paper and I try to come up with ones, I could probably just come up with so many memorable experiences because I'm just always in the theater. But and they stick with you. Just like you said, Brian, when you talked about Jackass and stuff and Blair Witch, they stick with you. They, as a movie fan, they hit the feels, right? Like I said, when I saw Jackass Forever with my nephew, my friends and family, good experience, fun times. Thanks for that question and sharing your memories because that's always fun to hear. If you have any more stuff, anybody, questions, topics, bring them on up. As I said, you could send a text on Spotify or iTunes or Instagram and Twitter and TikTok, Dom Solo Reels. But let's get into the other stuff of this episode. Got a lot to talk about here. So as far as other stuff going on, did you hear this thing about the monkey? Right, the monkey came out, and And as I said, I did an episode about that. If you haven't listened to that, go check that out. But this was based on a Stephen King short story that was collected in the short story collection Skeleton Crew. Very famous cover. I mean, if you're a Stephen King fan, you know the cover. The monkey is there. Now, I didn't realize, I talked about this last couple episodes too. Like, I think I read the skeleton, the monkey, and I read Skeleton Crew back in the day. I've forgotten, honestly, with the stuff I've read over the years. But the cover had the monkey, and it had him with what are those called, snare drums, the ones that bash, right? No, that's not a snare drum. Whatever the hell those are. Somebody who knows more about drums tell me. But the metal ones, the brass ones, whatever the hell they are. But we've come to find out now, movie news wise, that Osgood Perkins, the director of The Monkey, was talking about that. And like in the original short story, it's those drums. Now, if you watch the movie, it's a regular drum with like the stick. He had to change that because apparently in Toy Story 3, a monkey toy pops up with those metal drums, and Disney copyrighted that monkey, which is so fucking bizarre. Now, I will say, like, if you watch the movie, it doesn't miss a beat as far as changing the drums, and I think it actually works better in its favor, and that's kind of what the interview was about with him, because he was basically saying, we had to think of something else, and it ended up working well because the monkey, like, lifts the drum and then bangs it, and there's more, like, suspense to that, honestly, overall. I think it works better. But what world are we living in where Toy Story and Disney, I love Toy Story, but Disney was able to copyright this? First of all, that's like an old toy. That goes back to just being an old toy, a real toy. And then, past that, it's been used in other things, right? Like it's been used in, obviously, Skeleton Crew. There was a Stephen King adaptation called Monkey Shines that used it in like the promotional materials. Like, what the fuck is this world? Like, why are we able to copyright stuff? That's like me making a movie tomorrow and like using a fucking a nutcracker. Everybody knows a nutcracker, and then being like, oh, well, I'm going to put a trademark on a nutcracker. Like, that shouldn't even have happened. Why would they even allow that? That should have been something that got thrown out. But I thought that was an interesting little thing that if I would have known about when I did the monkey episode, I would have talked about it. But that's what is this world? That's my point. What is this world? I mean, that's the only reason. I'm just ranting and raving. What else? I'm in the mood for. I might do a rewatch. And this is off topic, but I think it's because the Red Hulk kind of triggered me to get the Red Hulk and Captain America kind of triggered me to watch some older Marvel movies. I'm kind of in the mood to revisit Ang Lee's Hulk movie with Eric Bana. I might do that soon. I don't know if I'm going to do an episode about it, but I haven't watched that in so long. It will be like a completely new movie for me. And I remember at the time, there was a lot of hype behind that movie, so I might do an older episode soon. I don't know. If you want to hear that, let me know. Maybe I'll do that. I got a couple of other ideas up there. But let's get into the main focus. We'll talk a little bit about Paddington in Peru, because he went to Peru. He's a bear, and he went to Peru. Obviously, this is a more family-centric movie. These movies are good. I will say, if you haven't seen the Paddington movies, really nice little heartwarming family movies, good for the kids. My wife likes them a lot. Paddington 1 was good. Paddington 2 was good. Now we have the third exciting, possibly final chapter of Paddington in Peru. What can I say about this movie? I mean, like, I'm not going to get into spoilers or anything, but you're going to have fun with it. If you like the other two, this is the same. Douglas Wilson directed that. He directed Paddington. Wait, he made his feature. Okay, so this is his feature directorial debut. But the other two, I believe. Let me go back here. Let me do this. I think that the other two were directed by the guy who did Wonka. Let me see. Paul King. Believe this guy did Wonka. I only bring this up because he did Wonka, and he did the story for Paddington in Peru. So he is involved. You see some of the returning cast members You see some familiar faces if you've seen the Wonka movie, and if you've seen Paddington, there are some casting similarities in there. But yeah, my point is these are all in the same vein. They're all very family friendly, based obviously on the children's book series. And he's a fun character. He eats marmalade sandwiches. I mean, he's doing his thing. He wears a little hat. He wears a little coat. I don't know. I can't really get into detail about Paddington in this one. I keep it a mystery. He has to go to Peru. Some shit went down. He has to go to Peru. I think if you have kids, I think you should definitely go see it. If you haven't seen any of these movies, definitely watch these movies. They're fun. And Wonka as well. But they all kind of have that same feeling. It's got a lot of emotion in this too. I mean, it's fun. You're going to laugh. Damn good cast, right? You got a good cast. You got the returning cast members. Obviously, Hugh Bonneville, Emily Mortimer, Julie Walters, Jim Broadbent, Carla Taus. Then you got Antonio Banderas is in this movie. Antonio Banderas. He pops up. He's doing his thing. He's always fun to see. I had a lot of laughs with this movie, and then there's some emotional stuff. There's maybe emotional stuff, and that might tie back to me being an emotional wreck. That maybe I'm almost in tears when I watch a movie about a teddy bear. But I don't know. It hit the strings. These are good, heartwarming movies. I think they're not dumbed down completely, right? They're not movies that you're going to watch with your kid and you're going to be like, oh, this is stupid. I don't like that. I think that's something that's a new trend nowadays with a lot of kids' movies and even kids' cartoons. If you watch it with a kid, you're like, this is really dumb. I feel like back in my day, I feel like back in the 90s and stuff, there definitely was dumb shit. And I've rewatched some of it nowadays, like, oh, this is stupid. But I think they gave you a little bit more rope, right? They gave you a little bit more like, oh, we're going to do things in there. Sometimes it goes over the kids' heads, but it's okay because adults will get it. And they don't dumb it down. They don't make you feel like you're watching baby stuff. This is just a nice movie. As I said, warm-hearted, Paddington in Peru. Recommend it. That's all I can say. Recommend it, especially if you got kids. Go out and see it. And if you don't got kids, go see it anyway. Me and my wife see it. My wife loves Paddington. As I said, he eats marmalade sandwiches. He keeps a sandwich under his hat. He talks with a British accent? Yeah. And he's nice. He's polite. He's got his manners. What am I even talking about anymore? What are we even talking about on the Movie Thoughts podcast, people? Yeah, that's all I can say. Recommend it. Let's get into some of the other stuff here. Finally finished Tulsa King Season 2. Fell behind on that, but was able to watch it. What a show. What a show. You got Terrence Winter, who's one of the writers on The Sopranos. You got Sylvester Stallone in there. You got a great cast. It's got an interesting tone. It's a little, there's a lot of lighthearted stuff in there. The show does get dark sometimes. I'm curious to see where it goes. It's probably going to get darker as it goes on, like I think a lot of these shows tend to get. But yeah, very satisfying. You had Frank Grillo joining the cast in this season. Some familiar faces here and there from other mob-related projects and stuff like that. Yeah, good show. Definitely delivered. 10 episodes, and they're like, some of them are half hour. They're very short, but it doesn't overstay its welcome. And that's one of the things I'm big on, as you know. So I had a lot of fun with that. The other big thing was Dexter ended. Dexter Original Sin, which honestly, Dexter Original Sin had no business being as good as it was. As a Dexter fan, if you watch Dexter, I think the last season in the original show and the last couple of seasons, I know like one of the creators had left at the time back in the day. They kind of got shitty. They were like, all right. Then they had Dexter New Blood a couple of years ago, which was a continuation and kind of like could have been its own standalone ending, like a new ending. And then they did this. They pulled this out, which was a surprise, Original Sin. And then they're also doing another Dexter show with Michael C. Hall that's going to continue Dexter's story. So this is the original Sin is a prequel. It's got a new cast playing the younger versions. You got Christian Slater in there. You got some other familiar faces. And all the people they got to play the younger people are great. I was a little afraid watching the show where I was like, oh, is it going to be that suspenseful? Because as you know certain characters aren't going to die yet or are not really in danger. They do a good job. It's cool because it's set in the 90s. There's a lot of 90s music. It feels like Dexter. It has that Dexter vibe. It takes me back to watching the show original. Michael C. Hall does the narration of the show, so that helps. And the kid that plays the young Dexter in this, he's fucking good. Like, he sounds like him. And it's not even so much like, oh, he looks exactly like him, but he captures his mannerisms, and he embodies him. So that helps the show. So if you're a Dexter fan and you're kind of like fell off with that, and I know, like, I've telling my brother, because we used to love Dexter and watch it and shit. And he didn't watch New Blood, and now he didn't watch this, but I keep telling him, like, yo, this is fucking good. This is good. And it adds some things to the mythology. I was a little worried, too, that, like, some of the stuff they put in there, I was like, ooh, this is tiptoeing around a dangerous area, that it might, like, retcon shit and, kind of fuck it up. But it doesn't do that. It does it in a good way. It makes it work. It actually makes the original series, it gives it a little more depth with some of the stuff. And you watch it now from a new perspective, which is cool. So I think I'm going to go jump back into the original run of Dexter, dust off my DVDs, and watch that, because it got me in the mood. But let's talk about Cobra Kai. Let's talk about Cobra fucking Kai, right? The ending of Cobra Kai, right? This is it. Cobra Kai, let me tell you, holy shit. Cobra Kai, what a show, like a surprising show overall, right? Because this show came to YouTube originally. Remember fucking YouTube for a hot second was making original content. That's when Cobra Kai came. And they did 2 seasons, I believe, on YouTube. I want to say it was called YouTube Red or something like that. Then YouTube decided that they weren't really doing original content anymore, so it kind of just went away. Then Netflix obtained the rights and continued it. And Cobra Kai never took itself too seriously, right? It knew it was a ridiculous concept because it's a sequel to, the 3 Karate Kid movies, the original Karate Kid movies. Always had kind of like a lighthearted feel. It was a little bit making fun of itself. It was very inspired, by the How I Met Your Mother. If you watch How I Met Your Mother, they had some stuff with Ralph Macchio and William Zabka on there. And the character of Barney was a big advocate of, like, oh, the Karate Kid's about Johnny, right? That was the whole joke in the show. And that's basically what they made Cobra Kai. They made it about Johnny. I think in the last couple of seasons, dropped a little bit for me in quality. Like, it got, not even so much that it dropped, but it got so over the top, because you always got to kind of top it, that it became like, all right, it's a little ridiculous. It became almost like a guilty pleasure for me. I enjoyed it throughout, but I think there was some storylines that borderline were like, all right, you got a little bit of that. Maybe some of the characters were a little goofy, but it was always good to see, obviously, those original characters, William Zabka, Ralph Macchio, obviously, John Kreese in there. What's his name? Fucking John Kreese. Why am I forgetting John Kreese's name? He would slap the shit out of me if I forgot it. Martin Cove. Then returning members like Thomas Ian Griffith from as Terry Silver from Part 3. It was always good. The guy Chosen from Part 2, that maniac, which if you grew up with Yuji Akamoto, he's great. He is great. Such a change, too, because like he's such a fucking maniac in Karate Kid 2, and it's so funny seeing how they made him such a lighthearted character. But my point is, Cobra Kai tapped into the nostalgia, and it did something like it was a legacy sequel that, as I said, it knew the subject matter. It didn't take itself too seriously. It introduced new characters. It was engaging. And it didn't try to be like this fucking like award-winning thing, right? It wasn't like you were sitting there like, oh, they're trying to really make it like a dark. Because that's what I hate sometimes about reboots too. It's like, oh, we got to do the dark version of the thing. We got to make it darker. Cobra Kai didn't do that. They released these last episodes in waves. I think 5 months ago, whatever it was. They did 5 episodes. Then they did another 5 episodes. This is the last 5 episodes. I've watched it all now. I will say, like, within these, I think it was 15 episodes. Within the 15 overall, I had some opinions. I think there was some stuff that could have been cut out. I think there was some stuff that was a little bit meh, a little bit filler here and there. But I will say, as far as the newest 5 episodes, the last 5 episodes, They did a great job on that. They did a great job. They closed off the story perfectly. I think they put the main. Now, I'll maybe talk about spoilers in a sec, but I'll warn you, as I said, they maybe they did the right thing where they put the focus back on the legacy characters in these last five, right? Because the show obviously has introduced a lot of kids here and there, who some are better than others. Obviously, some of these kid actors are good and they're memorable characters and they're funny and stuff. But now they focused in these five on Daniel, on Johnny, on the legacy characters. So that was cool to see. Feels very throwback. These final episodes, it feels like you're watching an 80s movie. It goes back to those roots. It goes back to the very beginning of the show, focusing on Johnny especially because that's how the show started. We started with William Zabka and his journey as Johnny, and it gets closed off very nicely. I was very happy with the way it ended. Is it ridiculous at times? Absolutely. Absolutely. There's some ridiculous stuff, especially this second to last episode. There's some crazy stuff in there, but I think if you're a Karate Kid fan, you'll have fun with it. And the way some of the characters kind of end their journey just fits into how those characters have always been, right? Like if they're ridiculous, they're gonna have ridiculous endings to their stories, and that's cool. They tried to give everybody, even the younger characters, a nice little, ending. I think they did a good job most of it, especially Johnny, especially Danny. I called him Daniel, whatever you call him, Daniel LaRusso. Yeah, trying to be spoiler light, but I was satisfied by it. I will, you know what? I'm going to talk about some little spoiler stuff. So if you haven't watched it, I'm going to talk about some spoiler stuff. Just some stuff I'd like to talk about to get off my chest. So stop listening, come back, and we'll talk later. All right, you're gone? Okay. So, the ridiculous thing I'm talking about is Kreese. Kreese. Kreese's ending, but it works, okay? Because obviously John Kreese, such a ridiculous character, right? Like, this guy's a maniac. He's been a maniac. We've seen his backstory now in Cobra Kai. They had him basically fight Terry Silver to the death on a boat and then blow up the boat with both of them on it. So wild stuff. But like, I love it. I can't think of a better ending for those two characters. Because those are two guys that are absolute fucking maniacs. They're trying to make kids kill each other and shit like that. And that's it. They went out in a blaze of glory. The thing I did like, as far as the John Kreese ending, was they had him right before that, they had him have this emotional journey, where he kind of became very human. And he had this nice moment with Johnny, with William Zabka, where they shared a lot of emotion and they kind of patched things up in the best way. And it was good. They were both I gotta say, because it's one of those things, especially in a show like this, where it goes super ridiculous, there's an emotional part in that, right? They're both kind of teary-eyed and they're talking to each other, and I was like, this could be bad, but it's good. You get great performances out of both actors. They're showing some range in there, and they're also, like, it feels heartfelt. It feels like a good closure to them, and, like, the shit that Kreese put Johnny through, and he's very, apologetic, and they hug, and that's a nice moment. So you have those kind of two endings of Kreese, because you have that, and then you have him fucking go out in a place. I love it. I just loved it. It was so good. It was so good as a Karate Kid fan, somebody who grew up on those movies, and yeah, good stuff. Also, having Johnny go full circle, winning the competition at the end, and him and Daniel being on the same team, having Ralph Macchio in the fucking Cobra Kai gear was really cool too. Just going places that the series has never gone and bringing it back, and these guys finally grew up and could be friends and could win together, essentially. It's good. It feels very throwback, as I said. There's even like a Rocky conversation, a kind of Rocky homage, which is funny because the original Karate Kid was directed by John G. Avildsen, if I remember correctly, and he also directed the very first Rocky. So before Sylvester Stallone started taking up the Rocky directing duties, that guy directed both Karate Kid original and Rocky. So that was a cool little reference there tied into that. The only wonky thing, which is cool, that they had a moment. They did this in the other part of the last season too, or the last batch of episodes where like Mr. Miyagi made an appearance like a dream. They kind of had that again, which it was like a homage to the scene where they jump him and they jump they jump Daniel in the skeleton costumes on Halloween, and Mr. Miyagi comes. They had that moment, and they had like a double filling in for Mr. Miyagi, and then there was some deep fake stuff. The deep fake was a little bit, I don't know what their budget is. You know, obviously it's not as big as like a Lucasfilm or a Disney thing or an Avenger movie, but the deep fake was a little wonky. But it was cool. The voice sounded like Mr. Miyagi, so that was one more time that we got to see Pat Morita in the role. But yeah, satisfying ending. I'm happy that it ended good, because like I said, I was kind of like some of the episodes in the previous batches felt a little bit filler. I didn't know where it was going. I think maybe in a perfect world, they could have just maybe cut some of the episodes out in the previous batches, but for what they did, I think they closed it off good. I think they, as I said, they focused on the original legacy characters, and that's what people want to see. So yeah, had a lot of fun with it. If you haven't seen it, I just spoiled it for you. If you have seen it, I wonder if you got the same feelings on it as me. But yeah, that's the episode for today. Kind of a longer episode. That's pretty much it. What's coming out next? I don't know. Probably be back soon. Check out the other episodes. As I said, we talked about, what did we talk about? We've been doing episodes. Captain America, right? Brave New World. Before that, we did, I know we did Hard Eyes. Now we did Paddington in Peru. What else did we do? We did the Companion movie. I don't know. Been catching up on my movies, getting back into it. Check me out on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram at Dom Solo Reels, where you could watch me post funny stuff. As I said, you could contact me on there as well with questions or requests or anything. And you could also send the texts on the option on Spotify, iTunes, wherever the hell else that text is. Just sends a message to me, essentially, and I'm able to see your questions and stuff. Thanks again for reaching out, Brian, on there. And that's pretty much it. Thanks for listening, and have a good night.